Vladimir Lenin was anti-World War I because he didn't believe a bunch of people needed to die so European monarchs could redraw borders and swap stolen resources. Welcome to the story of Vladimir Lenin. And this is actually part 3 of this series, so make sure you go back and get caught up. But where we left off, Lenin had just repositioned himself to the head of the Bolshevik Party, and World War I was just breaking out across Europe. And when the war started, Lenin was on the Polish-Ukrainian border. So he ends up getting arrested for being Russian, but quickly is able to prove that he isn't a sympathizer of the Romanov regime. And I'm sure that wasn't hard for him to prove since all he ever did was write about how terrible they were. But because this is wartime, Lenin and his wife relocate to the neutral ground of Switzerland. And he is writing some bangers during the war, like his famous book Imperialism, The Highest Stage of Capitalism in 1917. And it's here we really start to see his own ideologies, or Leninisms, form. His philosophical theologies have now broken away from the traditional Marxism that he held as his prominent ideology, notably challenging Marx's idea that the shift from living in an autocratic society to communism had to be slow, going from a society ruled by kings to a society ruled by the middle and upper class to a society ruled by socialism, and then finally into communism, with the idea that society needs to be conditioned for the next step so that people are able to work together in a like-minded way. But Lenin is looking at Russia and he's like, shit is so ass backwards over there. So Lenin thinks because the upper class is so scattered in Russia, it might be possible to go from a czarist government to a full socialist revolution, skipping the middle and upper class phase. And while Lenin is clocking that in Switzerland, Russia is getting busted up against the Germans in World War I. Tsar Nicholas II is in charge of the military, and he is commanding them like dog shit. And now for the Russian people, the war is causing supply chain issues for food, medication, and goods, which is causing extreme scarcity within the Russian population. So now, everyone's son is dying in the war and no one can afford food. The people are fed the fuck up and erupt into a massive protest in February of 1917 in the city of St. Petersburg, which is now going by its warrior name, Petrograd. And over the next week or so, the Romanov government is losing more and more control in the nation. And by March, even the military is no longer willing to support the Tsar's government. And so Nicholas II is kind of like, well, shit, and he just abdicates the throne, ending a 300-year rule of the Romanov dynasty. And like I had said, Lenin and the Bolsheviks see this war as a needless conflict between capitalist and imperialist regimes for land and resources. And he wants absolutely no part of that shit. And now that the Tsar has fallen in Russia and the Russian people are not very pro-war, Lenin wants to go back to Russia. And Germany is like, what was that? Oh, you wanted to go back to Russia? You? The guy that's definitely gonna go in there and destabilize the government of Russia that we are fighting in the war? Yeah, for sure. We'll actually help you get to Russia if you want, bud. Germany ultimately is just looking for an easier battle on the Eastern Front, so they don't mind greasing this situation, and they arrange for Lenin to get back to Russia, hoping he's gonna destabilize the government and relieve the German army. It's a pretty long journey, and in the meantime, a fairly centrist government is forming as a provisional parliament, but the country is so down bad politically that everything is falling apart, and the war front is a disaster. Lenin arrived in Petrograd in April 1917, and he starts holding pretty substantial rallies to bolster support for the Bolsheviks, referencing and distributing the writings he had done on the situation known as the April Thesis. The document pushed for a new government that was based around workers' unions and councils called Soviets. And revolution is in the air. The people are now ready and open to change the system that has violently oppressed them. It ramps up during the July days, which is where the workers and the soldiers just hauled off on the government, a conflict that saw Leon Trotsky get arrested and our boy Lenin flee to Finland. And in the aftermath, everyone pretty much immediately starts planning the next attack, including Russian soldiers who are just sick and tired of being left out to dry on the war front. And the provisional government ends up losing control of the military so bad that they turn to the Bolsheviks and they're kind of like, hey, do you want to maybe work together and help us? And we see Leon Trotsky elected as the leader of the Petrograd Soviets. And since the provisional government is now playing ball, Lenin is also making his way back to the city. The Bolsheviks were much more popular than the Mensheviks at this time, because although they had more extreme views, they also had the most clear and consistent values and messaging thanks to Lenin. So the Bolsheviks leaned into that popularity and threw a coup against the government on April 25th/November 7th of 1917, depending on the calendar, in an event forever known as the October Revolution. Lenin and Trotsky were really scheming on this one. They had those armed militias on lock in the cities. They had so much influence at the time that the provisional government knew what was going to happen, they just did not have the power to stop it. So though they tried to shut down the cities, the Bolsheviks moved to occupy all of the government buildings the next day, taking control of Petrograd and Moscow, and then the Bolshevik Red Guards took to the Winter Palace and removed the provisional government. And once they ran the coup, they pretty much immediately convened a Congress of Russia's workers, councils, and Soviets in Petrograd, and a communist state was established. Though, just like Karl Marx predicted, the idea of communism and the socialist revolution was not as popular with the farmers outside of the cities. And to make it more complicated, the empire is fucking massive. It has a multitude of languages, landscapes, and cultures within it, from the Pacific Ocean to the Baltic Sea, all the way to the deserts of Central Asia and up to the Arctic. So there are Russians, but there's also Ukrainians, Polish, Georgians, Latvians, Estonians, Armenians. You get it. And the new government wants to ease everyone's mind that they will be represented. And they write their Declaration of the Rights of the People of Russia pretty quickly, within like a week of gaining power. The document confirmed that all of the ethnicities of people living under Russian rule were equal and sovereign. It abolished all national and religious privileges and even promised the people would have a say to decide their own political future. And though both Lenin and Stalin signed it, neither of them really upheld that document very well. Within months, the communist regime was pulling back some of its initial ideologies. There are multiple revolutionary groups in Russia, and all of them still want their seat at the table. The Bolsheviks may have run the coup, but the Mensheviks still want representation within the government, and so do the other groups. And early in 1918, they really do try to make room for everyone. They try to make it work in a system where everyone feels heard and represented. But by about March, the Bolsheviks are just kind of like, psych, and rename themselves to the Russian Communist Party and make a play for absolute power. And I won't even cap, they really do get a lot of shit done. But the drama, the infighting, the bullshit that goes on in the government over the next few years truly would be a highly rated reality show. It's absolutely insane. So if you want to know how they got down in the Russian Communist Party, make sure you're following me so you don't miss it, and leave me a comment so I can use it in the next video. And I'll meet you right back here for the next one.